Today we're making the card trick quilt block. This is also known as the winning hand. This block has an optical illusion type of look to it, and it looks pretty complicated. It did take me a little bit of time to wrap my head around it, but I think I figured out a way that's fairly simple and straightforward to make it, although there is a lot of steps. So let's just get started here with our pieces of fabric. So for our background pieces, we're going to need 4 squares of fabric. Now all of our squares are 3.5 inches for this 6-inch block here. So I've got some letters here to kind of keep things straight here, but we'll need 4 squares that are 3.5 that are the background color. Then we'll need 3 of all of the colors for our card trick. So we'll need 3 red or B, 3 blues, 3 pinks, and 3 yellows. And I've just got the little letters here to kind of keep things straight as we go along. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be making some half square triangles. So let's just grab our background fabric, and then on the back side of each of these pieces, let me just move these kind of up out of the way. On the back side of each of these pieces, we're going to be drawing our lines. So we'll line up the 1/4 of an inch marking that's on the ruler, and we'll line that up corner to corner on our square of fabric, and then we will just draw a line along the edge of the ruler. And this will give us the lines that we need to stitch on. This is the way I prefer to do half square triangles. I don't like just drawing a line straight down the middle and then guessing where 1/4 of an inch is when I'm sewing. I just like to know where I'm supposed to sew though. So that's why I do it this way. So we'll just go ahead and do that on all 4 of these squares. So next we'll grab one square of each color of our fabric, and we'll be using these for our half square triangles. So just grab one of each. Then we'll take our square and we will place right sides together. So since we drew on this side, that is the wrong side. A lot of times with white, it's kind of interchangeable on which is right or wrong, but now that we've drawn on it, that is the wrong side. So we'll just make these squares, or line up our squares here with right sides together for all 4 colors. Then we'll head to the sewing machine and we will stitch along both of these lines on all 4 of these squares. All right, we've got all of these sewn along those lines that we drew. So next we're just going to slice them in half. So I'm just going to take my ruler, line it up from corner to corner, and then cut between the stitch lines. So we're going to take one of these, we'll set to one side, one to the other side, because we're going to be using them differently. So we just want to make sure we have one of each for each step. Okay, so our stack over here, we're going to take these ones and we're going to trim them. So these are going to be the half square triangles in the block, so they can be trimmed up to size. So we will trim them to 2.5 inches. So I'll just take my little Quilt in a Day triangle square up ruler, and I line up the 2.5 inch marking right along the seam and then trim the extra. Now this is a little bit of an extra trimming, like they're pretty big chunks that we're trimming off, but we're going to be using these ones and we need them to be that big, so that's kind of why they're that size. The next step we're going to do is we'll just grab my ironing mat here, and we're going to press these open. So these squares need to be, half square triangles need to be pressed towards the background color for the nesting of seams to work nicely as we assemble our block later. So how I do this is I just place the background color facing up, then I lift it up, and then that means that the seam will be pressed towards that background color. So just whatever side you want to have the seam facing towards, that's the side you put facing up as you're ironing. And then you just lift the edge and press it up like that. So then next we'll just take our little tails here here, and we'll just trim off the ends right here real quickly. So we have our 4 half square triangles. These are the corners of our block. We're just going to set those aside for now. We don't need those for a minute. Okay, so this other stack that we have, we're not trimming them right now because we're going to be using them, but we are going to press them open, and these need to be pressed towards the color. If I can get it here. So we want the seam on the color side of the half square triangle. So we'll just go ahead and do that. And then we are going to set these aside for now as well. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab one of each color again. And then we're going to make some more half square triangles. At this point, we're making this center block. It is like a hourglass little unit, so that's what we're making here. So we're going to take, let me get this straight here, let me look at my notes. We're going to do B and C together, and then we'll do D and E together. So I'm just going to flip these over like this, just so I keep them together. And I'll grab my little scratch paper here. We're also going to draw the lines on the back, just like we did with the other half square triangles. Okay, then we will just head to the sewing machine and we will stitch these two together just along those lines that we drew. Okay, so we've got that done. Next, we'll just cut them in half, like we did before. Okay, so for this unit, we're going to just need one of each. So we'll keep these two and we will set these other two aside we can use for another project. Okay, so we're going to press towards C and E, which is the blue and the yellow. This will just help with our nesting seams, and this will be all written in the blog post as well as in the printable that I'm creating for this quilt block that you can purchase. That pattern will have 5 different sizes. So this is the 6-inch quilt block, but it will also have a 9, 12, 15, and 18-inch block. So now that we've got these two blocks together, we're going to place them right sides together, and we're going to arrange them so that those seams are opposite of each other so we can nest them. So on this side, the seam is pointing towards the right, and then this side is pointing towards the left. And then we'll just line those up. We're going to take our little ruler and we'll just make our lines one more time on this fabric. Just again, lining up that 1/4 of an inch marking from corner to corner on the square and then drawing along the side. So then we'll just take this to the sewing machine and stitch those 2 lines. Okay, so we've got that sewn. We will just slice this right down the middle between the stitching. Okay, so this will give us 2 hourglass quilt blocks. So you'll want to find, if you have the printable, or if you're just looking on the on my website for the tutorial, you can find the layout, and so you'll just want to make sure you grab the one that is laid out the same way. So you can see if I try to set this here, it's not lined up the same. We have the pink on the bottom, but the other colors are mixed up. So then we'll grab our other piece, and then if we put the pink on the bottom, the yellow lines up, the red's on top, the blue's on the side. So that's handy to have the printable, or just check out my website to make sure you got everything lined up right. So we're going to take this one that's correct. We're going to trim it to 2.5. So on this block, so you'll see, since we have these other pieces, there's a line on the ruler, so I can line up this line with the stitching that's going vertical, line up the 2.5-inch marking along the stitching along the bottom, and then that will make sure that we have our block exactly square, and the corners will be, the points of the block will go straight to the corners, just like this. So that's how we do that. Let's see if I can show this. if you take the middle and you kind of fiddle with it a little bit, you can get it to lay flat, and you'll see this little mini 4-patch right here. So that's what you're going to want to do. You don't have to do this, but it does help your block lay nice and flat if you can open that up just like that a little bit. And it just reduces the bulk because all of those pieces are spread out around instead of all on one side like that. So that's kind of how I do that, and then we'll just trim these little tails again. Where's my scissors? Okay, so there's our center block. That is all done. We'll set that aside with our half square triangles that are finished. And then we will come back to our unfinished half square triangles. Now these units are going to be the sides right here. So it's going to have a half square triangle, and then the other half is going to be like a quarter square. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to use this as my example because the colors are the same. But you would go by like A, B, C, or D if you were using different colors. Okay, so I have the pink half square triangle, and this piece is going to be the small little quarter triangle. So you'll look on your block or your example or on the tutorial online just to keep things straight, or you could draw one. Do you want to see my little drawing here? This is kind of my notes, so I've just kind of drew what I wanted in the color so I can keep track as I was creating this tutorial. So you'll take your half square triangle, that's going to be this small piece, and then you're going to see what's next to it, and so it's blue or C. So I'm going to grab that one, and we're going to place it right sides together like this. Now, one thing I probably should have did first before we get all tangled up in the different colors is just draw on the back side of all of my half square triangles. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then we'll go back to matching up the colors. So that one's done. And you want to draw the lines vertically from the seam that you already have on there. So you're going to line up the opposite corner with your 1/4 inch marking and draw the lines. Okay, so now we have all the lines drawn on the back, so we can just be ready to go once we match them up. So I'm going to grab my next piece. So I have the blue here, and remember the blue is going to be this, the half square triangle is the small part, so that means we need a red to match with it, or B, and we'll just place it right sides together. Now you'll notice that the blocks are not the same size. That doesn't really matter. We're going to trim things up later, but it's just easier to cut them all the same than to go through and calculate how much, because this was like 3 1/8 or something, and so that's just harder, I think, to cut than just having them all 3 1/2 to begin with. So then we'll take our yellow half square triangle, and that matches up with the pink, so we'll take that one right sides together, and then of course the only one left is the yellow with the red half square triangle. So we'll just take these over to the sewing machine. We have all 4 of them. We'll just stitch as we have with all of the other half square triangles we've made so far. Okay, so we have them all stitched together, and next we're just going to slice them in half from corner to corner between the seams, and I'm just going to kind of keep them together for a moment. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is just start laying out the block, because I don't know which side of these pieces necessarily I want to use. So if you open them up, you can see that they are different. The half square triangle, the color, the blue, is on opposite sides, and I'm not sure which one I want to use or which one I need to use for the block yet. So I'm just going to take my block and I'm just going to lay it out. Now I'm using the example, but again, go to the website or print out the pattern so that you can lay things out. So I'm just going to take my center, and then I will just arrange it. I'm going to line it up the same way that this block is. and just get all these corners. The color is pointing towards the middle, and just line them up the same as the block here. Okay, so now we need to determine which of these two pieces match our quilt block. So we'll just take a look here. We have the red pointing up to the left, and then we have the blue on the bottom. So that means that this square is the one we're going to be using. If we put the other one with the red towards the upper left, then the blue is not on the bottom. So that one we will set aside. We do not need that piece. So we'll just go through the rest of our blocks just like this and make sure we have the correct pieces, or we're using the correct half for our block. So this is a little messy. I didn't want to trim them all up until I knew which one I was going to be using. So these are the 4 that we need. So we'll take our little cutting mat here, and we will again trim these to 2.5. Again, lining up the vertical line with the stitching that's vertical, and then the 2.5-inch line along the stitching along the bottom. Okay, so next we will just grab our 4 pieces and we'll press them open. We want to have the solid side facing up so that the seam will press towards that solid side, just like this. So the reason we don't want to press it this way is that will create a lot of extra bulk where the 2 seams meet. If we press it towards this side, then it lays a lot flatter. So we'll just repeat that with the remaining pieces. Okay, and then we will just trim off those little tails real quick. All right, anybody else feel like that was a little mind stretching there to get everything? We have all of our pieces, so now it's just a matter of arranging them, make sure everything is lined up correctly, and then we will just stitch it together as a 9-patch. So we'll just add these pieces together, make sure I'm getting them in the right order, and I'm missing a piece. There it was under my cutting mat. Okay, so we just have these 9 squares of fabric. We've got them laid out. We'll just want to make sure that all of our colors are connected to make the little cards. And then we'll just head over to the sewing machine. I'm just going to take this top row and I will stitch them all together. I will make sure that they are right sides together as I'm doing that. All right, so another thing I wanted to mention, as you're putting your pieces together, you can line up the seams to nest them. So on this piece we have a seam coming this way and we have a seam coming this way, and the way that we've pressed them, they will line up so that the seam, this one is one way, this one's the other way. When we line this up to sew it, we want to make sure that we line that up, but those seams up against each other as we stitch, and then we come out with points that match up just perfectly. So that's kind of the point of nesting our seams. Next we will press our strips open. So we're going to take our top and our bottom strip. We will lay them so that the middle is on top. So that means it will press towards the middle. So then when we come to this side, we'll place the middle piece on top, and then it will be pressed towards the middle, just like that. So we'll repeat that with our other piece of fabric, our bottom strip. Okay, and then our middle piece we are going to be pressing towards the outside. So we want our outer edge on the top, and then we'll press it out. And then the same thing on the other side. Okay, so we'll just line up our block again in the right order, and then we'll just take it to the sewing machine and we will stitch the rows together. All right, so the last thing to do is just press the block open, and it doesn't matter which way you press the seams on the final press, so just whichever way is easiest for you. So that is how you make the card trick quilt block. So I have a little bonus for you to remember all these pieces, extra pieces that we had that we didn't use. You can make an additional quilt block if you make a few more half square triangles. So to do that, you can just grab 4 more background pieces, and I did make these a little bit smaller. These are 3 inches, so a 1/2 inch smaller than the original size, so that we don't have to trim so much off. And then we're just 1 of each color that we have, and we'll just do the same thing making the half square triangles. Okay, so we have all of our squares with right sides together. We'll just take them over to the sewing machine and stitch along those lines. Okay, next we will just cut these all in half. Just line up our ruler corner to corner, cut between the lines. We are going to use 1/2 of the half square triangle. The other one you will have extras of each color. Okay, so we have our 4 half square triangles. We have all of our scrap, our extra pieces, and we're just going to take them all and we will just trim them all to the 2.5 inches with our ruler here. Okay, next it's time to press them open, and remember the half square triangles we want to press towards the white or the background color. And then on our little, that one is our hourglass, but our other blocks that have these quarter squares in them, we want to press toward the solid color. So we'll just get all of these pressed real quick. Just a reminder on the hourglass, we're going to try to open it up here, if we can remember which. Set that down. We'll open up our middle, and then one side will be pressed one direction so that it will lay flat, and the other side will be pressed the other way so it will lay flat. So that's just a quick reminder on that one, but we'll just go ahead and press all these blocks open at this point. Okay, and then we will just take our little scissors and just trim all those tails. Okay, so then the next thing, all we have to do is assemble the block. Now, one thing that's different about this block is because we're using the leftover pieces, we're using the opposite pieces as we did before. So everything is going to lay opposite of our block. So we will take our piece, just choose one, the red, and we will just flip it to the opposite side. And then our red will be on the opposite side on this side. And then this piece will be on this side, and just arrange your block so that the pieces are opposite. So let's do this one here and this one here, and then you can just take your corners and find the color that they need to go in. And I don't think I got that one right. That's the way it should go. Okay, and then we'll just sew it together like a 9 patch, but you hate to, all these ones that take a little bit extra work, you hate for them to go to waste, so just making a few extra half square triangles, you can make up another block, so you have 2. Thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful for you to wrap your mind around how to make this card trick quilt block. Go ahead and grab the pattern in my shop. You can make it in 5 sizes. There's color diagrams, all the instructions, the cut list and everything, so go ahead and grab that.